We're going to start that discussion with Amy McCleney, who is going to review some of the work she's done looking at evaluating a variety of sorbents. So Dr. Amy McCleney she's a research engineer at Southwest Research Institute, where she has, over the last 5 years, conducted testing, analysis, and computational efforts in the areas of fluid dynamics and thermal sciences. Her projects include investigating the performance of blowout preventers under flowing conditions, evaluating the effectiveness of equipment used for dispersant surface delivery, and assessing the current state of the art in sorbent technologies. So welcome, Amy.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
We can hear you, we can see your picture, we can see your face.
Yay, let me share my screen.
Oh, you're on track. Once you're in presentation mode, you're good to go. There you go.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Again, my name is Amy. I am super excited to be here today to talk to you guys about the work that we accomplished on assessing the current state of the art in sorbent technologies. So this was an effort that was conducted at Southwest Research Institute and was funded by BESI under Project 1118. So this is a completed project. And so the link that is provided on the screen there is where you can actually find the final report. So I'm not going to go over everything that we went into and dug into, but definitely some of the highlights from this effort. All right, so this presentation is great because it gives a strong background on sorbents and kind of leads way into the remaining presentations that you will see in this session. So what are sorbents? Sorbents are insoluble materials or mixture of different materials that are used for oil spill recovery on either land or water. So a lot of different sorbent types exist, such as pads, booms, loose, and they tend to be single use only. So OSROs will often stock a large number of different types of them and then use them and then dispose of them. Well, over the past few years, there have been these new sorbent materials that have been published in literature that have claimed characteristics that are said to help improve oil spill response operation. So some of these claimed characteristics are ones you see on the screen here, meaning they have higher sorption rate capacity, refinement, as well as they are reusable, alleviating disposal needs from the single-use sorbents. However, these new sorbents have not been compared against our current state of the art or what we currently use for sorbents out in the field. So the objective of this work was really to assess where we are at in industry with sorbent use and what commercial products are available to see if there is any new sorbents that are out there that can help fill any industry needs. So this was done in 3 separate tasks, first being an OSRO interview, the second being a commercial product review, and finally, we did a literature review looking at trends on sorbent research and development activities. So first go into the OSRO interviews. So we compiled information on current sorbent use in the field from different industry experts. So we sent a digital survey as well as we did these on the phone interviews or digital survey to 10 entities. And now we were abiding by the Paper Reduction Act, so we couldn't send a whole lot of surveys out, but we did receive 8 responses back, which is a pretty high turnaround for a survey response. And the interview information that we focused on, you can see located on the slide, so it's located in that table. So we focused on different regions, locations, and we asked them questions about their decision-making process for sorbent use, purchasing, as well as if they had any suggestions for improvements for the technologies themselves. So the next few slides will go over a summary of what we found out from these interviews. Now, all of the OSROs that we interviewed respond to spills in North America, and one of the entities responds to spills globally. All of them said that sorbents are basically used in every oil spill, usually in the initial cleanup phase or the final cleanup phase. Most of the sorbents that they use are made from synthetic materials, majority of them being polypropylene materials. Some mentioned they have tried to use more natural-based sorbents. However, they tend to not work as great in certain environments, such as coastal or wetland regions. None of the OSROs say that they like to use reusable sorbents. Some of them didn't even realize there were reusable sorbents available to use. The main reason why reusable sorbents, they didn't want to use them is because of the total life cycle cost of the sorbents themselves, meaning the purchase cost as well as containment and then disposing of the fluid afterwards. The other concern was that they could possibly reintroduce oil back into the environment. Finally, they said that sorbents are designed to effectively retrieve oil. Basically, they like them as designed. However, there are some conditions that lead to poor performance, such as emulsified oils or slicks on water. Also, there are certain environmental conditions, such as, tidal conditions, that could lead to retrieving the sorbents a little bit more difficult. Some mentioned that they have seen promise with loose type sorbents, so they have a high sorption capacity compared to the other sorbents that are available, but they're definitely not always feasible in all environments. So they're more feasible in onshore applications versus more offshore applications. Again, they said sorbents are basic in design, generally perform as they are intended, and they were concerned that making them more complicated might not be cost effective instead of using just one single use sorbent and then tossing it. They did mention that sorbent use is based off of general past experience and best practices. Now, some say they follow guidelines. They have specific guidelines for deploying sorbents on different oil states and oil types, as well as environments. And some say that they follow the best practices provided by the IOGP. Now, while they like sorbents as is, pretty much in terms of design, they did provide offered potential improvements for sorbents. So the big one, and most of every OSRO said this, was that they would like to define a global standard for effectiveness. So basically that would, quantify sorbent performance. They also said what would be nice if a single sorbent type or a single material could sorb a larger range of oil types, as well as have faster sorption rates, have a higher performance in water-based applications, meaning that they are more hydrophobic. One mentioned that it would be really interesting and nice to have a material that can attract the oil to the sorbent. And then having more natural materials that can be left on site to degrade. And overall, they did mention that minimizing waste generation would be overall nice. All right, now I'm going to move on to the commercial product review. So during this effort, we looked at what commercial products for the sorbents we could just buy off the shelf. And we looked through manufacturer's website and product data sheets to collect the information that you see on the bottom of the slide. So there's a lot of products out there that you can purchase. So we looked at 317 different products across 70 different vendors. So the next few slides are just going to go over the high levels of what we found in terms of what is available on the market to purchase. So in terms of off-the-shelf products, the most available products are your type 1 sorbents, which are your rolls, sheets, pads, blankets, and webs. And of those type 1 sorbents, about 22% of them were pads that are commercially available to purchase. The next most available products are your pillows and socks and booms, each accounting for about 20% of the products currently available. And then you have your loose sorbents, which are your type 2, accounting for 17% of the market. And finally, the least available products are your sweeps and pom-poms. Now, in terms of the environment that the sorbents can be used in, So most sorbents that we found that we can purchase right now can be universally used on either land or water. So that's about 67% of them, while 17% say they are just meant for water only, and 15% recommend for oil spills on land. In terms of sorbent material, a majority, about 60% of the sorbents that we found are made from polypropylene. So that kind of coincides what the OSRO says, saying that they're using more of these synthetic polypropylene type sorbents instead of more of the natural sorbents, because these are the most abundantly available. You then have organic materials, which counts for 17%, and we split cotton from other natural materials because it was the highest subcategory. So that accounts for 9%, as well as you have 9% being other polymers. Now, looking at being able to reuse the oil once it has been absorbed by the sorbent and then released, so reusing the sorbed oil. So this is a feature that some of the products say that they had. So about 20% or 19% of the products said, yes, this is a feature of our sorbent, that you can reuse the oil after it has been released from the sorbent. About 34% said, no, this is not a feature, and 46% said that that was information or wasn't available, meaning that they either didn't know or wouldn't tell us. However, we believe that if this was a feature, it would have been something that would have been marketed overall. So it's probably most likely not a feature of the products. So in terms of being able to reuse the sorbent in general, so while the OSROs don't actually like to use reusable sorbents, 20% of the market contains reusable sorbents currently, and about 48%, almost half, said, no, these are single-use sorbents only, and 31% said did not provide this information. Again, we think that although if it was a feature, that this feature would be marketed as such. Now, in terms of disposal, so sorbent disposal is usually dictated by the regional spill response plan, as well as dictated by state regulations. However, some of the vendors did provide guidance on disposal methods. So about 44% mentioned that incineration is their highest preference for disposal of the sorbents, 18% being landfill, and 8% being biodegradation. And although the biodegradation is low, it kind of makes sense because there are less natural materials available on the market to actually purchase. So it kind of, the percentages make sense and coincide with each other. And then 30% mentioned or didn't provide a disposal method. But again, these disposal method is usually dictated in the regional response plan. All right, so now looking at the R&D activities for sorbent research. So we conducted a literature review on sorbent R&D activities, and we used standard industrial and technical literature databases to conduct this literature review. What was super challenging about this portion of the project was that hundreds of publications are released each year about these brand new innovative sorbents that are going to revolutionize and change oil spill response as we know it. So we had to sort through a lot of different information and technical documents to find information that was relevant. So the assessment that we did, so you can see that information located at the bottom of the slide. So we looked at 357 documents overall, and we narrowed it down to 175 that were relevant. And those documents publication were from the past 10 years. All right, so in terms of the publications currently and publicly available within the last 10 years. So again, if it's not published information, it's not any information we could find. So a majority of the R&D activities are actually occurring in China, and that accounts for about 33% of the total publications that we found. This is followed by the US and India, which accounts for 8 and 7% of the research activities. Now, in terms of publication by type, so what are they actually developing? So in terms of that, about 64% is your type 1 sorbent. So they're developing more of the rolls, sheets, pads, blankets, and webs. And then followed by your type 2, which are your loose sorbents. So that's about 30% of the research has been focusing on developing type 2. So all other types, which are your pillows, your pom-poms, your strips, they kind of fall into these smaller percentages that are being researched and actively being developed. Now, in terms of environment, a lot of the R&D activities have focused on developing sorbents for water-based applications, so about 70% of them. Then 26% of them can be universally used on either land or water, and then only 4% for land only. Now, in terms of by material type, so there's actually really good distribution between what is being developed between synthetic versus natural materials. So natural being a little bit higher at 35% and synthetic being at 32%. But that split is pretty equal. So it looks like the R&D activities are focused generally everywhere. So there is this category we called advanced, which is sorbents that are kind of hybrid sorbents or enhanced sorbents that are beyond just being synthetic or natural. An example of that would be an aerogel. So for the advanced types sorbents, about 28% of the research has focused on developing these types of sorbents. Now, in terms of reusability, this is probably the largest disconnect between industry wants and needs and where I think R&D is headed. So in terms of publication by reusability, so 53% of the research activities have been developing sorbents that can be reusable. Again, the OSROs, either not knowing that reusable sorbents exist or not wanting to use them. 17% of the sorbents that we found that are being developed are single use only, and 30% did not provide any information whether or not the sorbent was reusable or not. Okay, so I just spewed a lot of numbers and a lot of information. So this graphic here summarizes everything that I discussed over the last few slides. Basically, where are we at in industry for sorbent technologies? So based off of our interviews, it was mentioned that sorbents are used in every oil spill in initial cleanup phase as well as the final cleanup phase. And the majority of the sorbent types that are used, mainly pads and rolls, and they are made from synthetic materials versus more natural-based materials. And they also majorly dispose of them in landfills in the waste flow process. So the new sorbent R&D activities have mainly focused on advancing materials for better sorption performance, also using more natural and recycled materials, as well as focusing on reusable sorbents to help reduce waste. Now, in terms of reusable sorbents across everything, 53% of the research has focused on developing sorbents that can be reused, while only a third of the commercial products offered are reusable currently. And then less than 1% of the products, these types of reusable sorbent products, are used in the field. So barriers to reusing these sorbents include, life cycle cost, as well as potentially recontaminating the environment with the oil that would be left on the sorbent. While the OSROs mentioned that they like sorbents as is, they did provide recommendations for improvement. So you can see them listed on the slide there. So one being better oil selectivity, faster sorption rates, natural materials that can be left on site to degrade, and then more efficient use and retrieval, as well as performance with a wide variety of different oil types. So that's all I have for you guys, but I do want to mention before I guess we start questions that there was a lot of information and it required a very large team to actually sort through all of the current information that has been available for the past 10 years. So do want to thank the SWRI project team members as well as our Bessie point of contact, Christy McCleney. She was an absolute joy to work with. And so this project was really fun for us and we were glad to be able to work on this effort. We all also want to thank all of the OSROs for providing all the invaluable information during our surveys. So that was information that we couldn't have obtained because it's not public information. So with that, I will take any questions.
No, thank you, Amy. Valuable work. And I'm glad that you reached out to the OSROs for their input because it's always been, kind of a question of, what is industry using? What does the industry want? What is industry willing to try and use? I mean, what's in their future in terms of what they see as having operational utility without extra expense that kind of makes them want to, push off from using that more expensive product. I've got a well, this is probably not appropriate, but kind of the bounty commercial comes to mind when I'm hearing presentations like this. It seems like we're continuing to look for the quicker, picker upper, and kind of in that vein, just answer a quick question for me. There are a couple of products classified as sorbents that actually have solidifying properties. Would those get classified under your advanced class of sorbent evaluations, similar to the aerogels, or how would you treat those?
Yeah, so we didn't actually, we talked about this as a team, whether or not we would treat those that solidified as sorbents. So those were not actually included in as being evaluated in this assessment.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Lindsay, do we have other questions for Amy?
Yes, we have questions and comments coming in from all angles, so hopefully we can get to all of them, but if not, we can send them via email. So first off, Amy and her colleagues are getting praise for this work, and it's been needed for a long time. Those are comments in the chat. Question, why do you think there's such a high percentage of reusable sorbents on the market despite OSROs not using them? Are they being used in other capacities?
That's a great question. So they may be used in smaller settings, such as a lab-based setting and not out in the field. So for example, here at Southwest Research, we have flow facilities. So we might buy reusable sorbents off the shelf from Granger or McMaster and continuously use them over and over again. So they may be being used, just not in the setting that we were assessing them for this case. And I don't remember the other part of that question. I apologize.
It was, are they being used in other capacities?
Yeah, so I think really it's, if they are being used, it's for on a small scale and not necessarily in these large oil spill cleanup operations.
Excellent. Next question. Do you think the existing sorbent standards, ASTM F726 and F716, testing sorbents in pure oil in a lab can really predict sorbent performance in the real world conditions of high seas, winds, and currents?
So if you read through both of those standards, the answer is not really. So the standard itself, while the standards itself, there are some information about, degradation over time. So testing, on a shake table inside a container to create that sort of caustic more environment. I don't think that really simulates what actually happens out in the field. So I think there needs to be definitely a little bit more work on defining effectiveness and how we test the performance of sorbents overall for their sorption capacity.
Great. And there's a call out in the chat from Don Pettit requesting if anyone has experience incorporating natural sorbents into spill response, please contact him by email. And maybe just one more question, Ellen, if we have time.
Sure, got a minute.
Okay, from Owen Gilbert, many regions we are working in are asking for more total cost of ownership clarity on custody and transfer of ownership of contaminants, et cetera. Did your study take into consideration the additional and extra costs associated with the use of single-use white plastic sorbents? For example, total carbon footprint, including all the trips to landfills, not removing oil from the water quickly, any effects of real-world conditions of wind and currents allowing the oil to flow over the booms?
Yeah, so that's a good comment. So the assessment did not take that into account. So when we did do our interviews overall, we asked about disposal and how that is handled in the field. And a lot of the OSROs just mentioned that that is not something that they handle directly. They know it goes in the waste flow process, but they usually have someone contracted that comes out and takes care of that for them. So there was kind of that disconnect where we didn't quite have enough information to do that type of assessment.
Thanks. I'll send the other question via email.
Great, thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks, Amy, and thanks for all the people providing questions.